In tandem, together we grow is the motto of In Tandem, and the Research Club for this year 2023 pursues with a theme-based series under the title Prize-Winning Story Pulitzer Prize. We are going to explore the Prize-Winning Story Pulitzer Prize with our amazing chairperson, Dr. Meghna Mudaliar, Associate Professor, Department of English and Cultural Studies, Christ University, Beecher Campus, Bangalore. So now our paper presenters. First paper presenter, Snowlin from English Literature, Queen Mary's College. She is going to present a paper on Man versus Nature in the Old Man and the Sea. And our second paper presenter, Mrs. Harriet Sheeba Freddy. She is going to present a paper on Harriet Beecher Stowe, A Life by Joan, the Hedrick. Our third paper presenter, Mr. Sayan Mazumder, research scholar, Department of Comparative Literature, Jadavpur University. He is going to present a paper on Pulitzer Prize and ecological implication. And so now I'm going to hand over the session to our chairperson, Dr. Meghna. Please, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sivashankari, and to everyone else who's organized this session for inviting me to be a part of it. I'm always very happy to be a part of any sort of research endeavor because I'm really interested in research. So just for you to know, I have been teaching for about 20 years now, and I started with Stella Maris in Chennai, and I was there. I taught there for 3 years, and then I also taught at IIT Madras for 4 years, and I've been in Christ now in Bangalore for the last 8 years, right? And my research area, so my PhD was from Stella Maris. It was on two immigrant writers. So I worked on Aga Shahid Ali and Michael Ondaatje, who are both writers who are of Asian origin but immigrated to North America. And I worked on Edward Said's notion of the contrapuntal rhetoric and Salman Rushdie's notion of the imaginary homeland, right? So since then, I have also developed an interest in this particular area of research, which is at the intersection between gender and ecology, right? So I work in gender and ecology, and also more commonly in the intersections between the two. Also, I would like to encourage the speakers maybe to try to keep it a little more conversational, I think, because I don't know if you all are presenting for the first time or if you've presented earlier, but since this is a forum where all of us are scholars and all of us are sharing our research interests, I would strongly recommend that instead of reading out entirely, maybe keep it a little informal. I think all of us would appreciate that. Maybe just start by telling us what you're working on, what your interests are, what your methodology is. I think in terms of a presentation, probably that might, facilitate more conversation and dialogue, which would be nice, right? So I know that we are used to thinking of paper presentations as extremely formal occasions, where we are expected to maintain decorum and all of that. But also, let's be a little, non-hierarchical in the sense that, you are not here to be judged by your audience. We are all sharing, we are all in the process of learning and sharing knowledge and all of that, right? So if you're comfortable with it, if you feel that you're more comfortable with reading something aloud from a written script, I'm okay with that. But I would encourage you to maybe think of it more as a conversation rather than a formal presentation, right? So, and please try to have a little fun. Don't necessarily think of it as something super formal that you're doing, right?
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. So I think we could start then with the presentations. What do you recommend, Sivashankari? Should we do all the papers first and then discuss? Or
Okay, ma'am. Sure.
yeah. So yeah, maybe if we can try to keep the presentations on the shorter side, right, so that we have a little more time for questions and discussion, that would be nice.
Okay, ma'am. So may I call the presenters now?
Yes, we can start.
Okay. So our first paper presenter, Snowlin from First Year English Literature. Please, Snowlin.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry I have a bad cold, but I'll just try to skip that.
That's
So,
fine. All the more reason that you can keep it short and just tell us the key points.
yes. So, I'll be doing it on Man versus Nature and the Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. So, it was published in the year 1952 and it won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1953. And critics think that Santiago, the protagonist, was based on this real life character called Gregorio Fuentes, who was an immigrant to Cuba and who also started fishing when he was a lad. Um, then the novel is set in 1940s in the Gulf Stream, in the Cuban beach, and it describes the daily routine of the Cuban villagers. And this novel also contributed to Hemingway winning the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1954. So, in any work of fiction, we see conflict that is between man and science, or between a man and a man, or between man and religion, or between man and his inner conflict. So, the conflict in this novel is between man and nature, and it is one of the major themes of The Old Man and the Sea, and that is quite evident from the title, The Old Man and the Sea. Santiago, the protagonist, he fights against many elements of nature throughout the novel, such as the marlin, the ocean, the sea, the sharks, the sun, the Portuguese man of war, and other creatures of the ocean. This conflict is characterized by the epic struggle that Santiago undergoes for 3 days and 3 nights, battling with hunger, the marlin, and the sharks. And this struggle is heightened as he is alone and has to fight as an individual against the many creatures of nature. And he constantly misses Manolin, the boy, who helps him, and he also longs for his help. Oja, in a thematic study of this novel, talks about how Santiago also finds himself alienated from the human society and the support of mankind which he longs for. He's also searched by planes and the coast guards, and he's given up for lost as they couldn't find him. This characterizes the space for this epic struggle and conflict where the protagonist is beyond the reach of other humans. Santiago's relationship with the four important creatures of the sea is noteworthy. He calls the marlin his brother, and he thinks that he is wonderful and strange, and feels that the marlin, though not as intelligent as the man who kills it, is more noble and more able than man. He is also very fond of the flying fish and wishes they were there instead of the dolphins, as they were his principal friends on the ocean and because they were very nutritious as food. He recalls the time when his feet had been stung by the deadly purple filaments of a Portuguese man of war, and he calls it a whore. Santiago kills 5 sharks and wounds the others and admits he enjoyed killing them in order to protect the marlin. So, this shows his diverse relationships with the sea creatures. Though Santiago hopes to find solidarity with the various creatures, it is implied that he always considers them as the other. Santiago empathizes with most of the creatures and tries to be kind to them, but his actions are dominated by the idea that man, Santiago himself, has to conquer nature, the marlin, the sharks, in order to eat and survive. He considers the time when he once killed another female marlin as the saddest thing he ever saw. And Hemingway himself says that the more Santiago felt sorry for him, the marlin, the more he wanted to kill him. The more he loved him, the more he wanted him dead. When the fish was hit by the sharks, he felt as if he had been hit himself, but only after the fish's death, when he had it taken to shore safely in order to sell his meat, not when he killed the fish. This adds the tension that builds up within the conflict and can be seen as he says that he loves and respects the fish very much, but that he will kill him before the day ends. So, about femininity in nature, the perception of nature as the other is emphasized when Santiago sees the ocean, a part of nature, as a woman, and he calls it la mar, which is the feminine form of ocean in Spanish, as he feels that the moon has affected the sea as the moon has also affected a woman. But bad things other people say about the sea are always said as if it were a woman, according to the novel. And the masculine form, El Mar, to refer the ocean, is used when the sea yields them money and can be seen as an equal. Santiago also calls the Portuguese man of war a whore, a derogatory term used predominantly against women. He thinks, I will show him, the Marlin, what a man can do and what a man endures. Eco-critically, this otherization of nature and labeling its so-called feminine qualities brings out the exploitation of man towards nature and towards the female sex. Hemingway tries to show through Santiago what a man is and the possibilities he is capable of. We see many influences of Hemingway's own life in the novel. Even early on in his life, Hemingway formed a close relationship with nature as his father taught him to hunt and to fish and to examine the specimens keenly, which helped him provide a very detailed description of nature in his writings. And here is one of the many pictures of Hemingway with marlins, as he held several records for catching marlins in the Gulf Stream. To conclude, through this theme of man versus nature and the conflict between man and nature, Hemingway stresses the dependence of human beings on the natural world. Zhang, in his essay on the ecological ethic in the novel, says that with tragic ending of the old man's final defeat by the sharks, the Hemingway has skillfully showed the great power of nature and the doomed failure of the destroyer of natural balance. Thus, Hemingway stresses on the ecological ethic and the ideas of mutuality between man and nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Snowlin. And now I would invite our second paper presenter, Mr. Sayan Mazumder, research scholar and Department of Comparative Literature. Please, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So, I am Shayan Mazumder and I am doing my MPhil from Department of Comparative Literature at Jadavpur University. My research area is uh, studying eco-critical novels from modern India, especially from the Northeast, and I'm working on Esterin Kire and Mamang Dai, and how those novels have a deep rooted eco-critical significance within themselves. In this um, what I say conference or a discussion, the topic I was given was the Pulitzer meaning story Pulitzer Prize. So rather than talking into any specific text, I would like to talk on the Pulitzer Prize itself, and how it has ecological implications within that spectrum. Um, I'm sharing my screen. Um, so there is a very small history about what the Pulitzer Prize is and how it was established. It was established by Joseph Pulitzer, and um, he allocated a large sum of money for different categories and awards to be given in those categories. So as prizes go, their controversy and criticism both coming together, and that makes that award even more popular. But what we have to take from any award is that it brings the work into conversation, into our mind, that why has someone won the prize. And from that perspective, the prize, here I will talk about some of the Pulitzer prizes that were given for environmental articles or journalistic investigations, and which have come into the forefront, bringing the climate change and eco-critical crisis uh, in in the forefront. The first prize that was given in this context was in 1917, that Ada Louise Huxtable for Pulitzer, won the first Pulitzer Prize for criticism, as she exposed the human and environmental effects of the federal renewal policies across the countries during the 1960s. Her article titled "Tough Times for the Country's National Assets," she said, conservation and community are two sides of the environmental coin. For the crisis of the environment is also the crisis of cities, of the man-made world. It's a crisis for survival and the soul, and of conscience as well. There are other many other. I have here the other prizes that have been given to articles or journalistic investigations on environmental concerns or climate change. Here are the few important prizes that were given. But one important quote that I would like to share is that um, in Isabel Wilkerson's article, he interviewed a person called David Landgren, a professor of geography and urban studies at Manchester College, Macalester College in St. Paul's, Maine. He said, they fight the river, dike the river, pollute the river, ignore the river. Now the river is taking back its old places. You can see the old marshes coming back in the farmers' fields, all the places where the duck ponds used to be. It's almost like a ghost. The water is saying, "This is where I used to be. This used to be my place." So we have taken so many things from nature, and these natural calamities is some way nature telling us or warning us that we should be more concerned and more critical about our actions. The whole concept of Anthropocene that we are seeing, that is coming up through many books, articles, and research, it is this that we have taken so much, and it is nature giving us a warning back. Um, the recent times, we see that one book that was given in one Pulitzer Prize that was given to the book "The Sixth Extinction: An Unnatural History" by Elizabeth Kolber. Uh, she explores the prize was given for an exploration of nature, and that forces the readers to consider the threat and the savior to a world of astonishing diversity. Her books have always tried to make people aware of the impending calamities of if proper action are not taken. In an interview, she says that here we are on the verge of mass extinction. Life goes on. Ironically or comically, I started to think, okay, what we are going to do in response to the rising tide, literally and figuratively. So, what are we going to do in response? From this context, I will like to take that the Pulitzer Prize Committee by themselves have taken many actions for this environment and the climate change. Um, uh, the Pulitzer Center stated that the Pulitzer Center guarantees on the abilities of communities in diverse regions to bounce back and adapt the impacts of climate change. A collaborative project by ProPublica and the New York Times Magazine traces the potentially catastrophic impact of the global warming of human migration. Their findings make clear the need for urgent action, and our journalists investigate climate change in the Arctic, the effects of on indigenous communities, the destruction of the fragile natural environment, and the conflict between humans and polar bears. Uh, the Pulitzer Center by themselves also established the Rainforest Journalism Fund to provide capital for local as well as international journalists reporting from journalists operating in the rainforests of Latin America, Africa, and Asia, as well as international journalists reporting from those regions. The fund represents a major investment in global environmental and climate reporting, with plans to support nearly 200 original reporting projects along with annual regional conferences designed to raise the level of reporting on global rainforest issues and deforestation and climate change. So we see that apart from honoring excellence in journalism and the arts, the Pulitzer Prize can become an agent for climate change. The efforts of the Pulitzer Center are in the right direction. So one must hope that the activism towards ecology and the environment can create a better pathway for the coming days for a sustainable future. Uh, the paper has other more um, in instances of people winning awards, the Pulitzer Award specifically for exclusively working on the fields of environmentalism, and it is this activism that a prize can bring, a prize can influence. And if organizations like these take more cognizance of the climate change, it can create a better future for every one of us. And we should take this activism and move forward with our approach in uh, academics, or in the way we live, or in the way we look at nature. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sayan Mazumder. And our third paper presentator, Mr. Harriet Sheeba Freddy. She is now going to present a paper on Harriet Beecher Stowe, Alive by Joan, the Hedrick. Please, ma'am.
Uh, Thank you all for this wonderful opportunity that I've received today to present my paper. Hope I'm audible. Yes, please.
Still you are with
Okay, thank you so much. The topic that I have chosen for today's presentation, though I have not worked down well for my presentation, but still I didn't want to miss this opportunity. The topic that I have chosen is Harriet Beecher Stowe, A Life, written by Joan D. Hedrick. And before beginning my presentation, I would like to introduce myself that I am Harriet Sheeba Freddy, working as an assistant professor at SRM Institute of Hotel Management. Why did I choose this? Because both of our names are same. I was named by my father as Harriet, based on the book that she has written called as Uncle Tom's Cabin, which every literature student should be aware of. So right from that time, he has fed me with the thought that I should be a liberator. I don't know what type of liberator I am, but in everything. So at my adolescent age or my teenagers and all, when I used to draft love letters, my father used to tell me, I thought my daughter would be a big writer one day or the other, but now she's ending up a writing career in writing stupid love letters like that. It's what he told me. So in this platform, I would really thank God for my dad, who always inculcated the thought of writing, and also by making me to have a great interest on being an abolitionist or liberator, or dealing with something or the other related to slavery, as Harriet Beecher Stowe has done. So this book has got the Pulitzer Prize for biography. She has got the Pulitzer Prize for two books. One is Harriet Beecher Stowe, and also on Jack London. Both are biographies. This was published in the year 1994 by the Oxford University Press. And as I said you earlier, this one is for the biography, and it is for the book written by Harriet Beecher Stowe and on her life. She has written many, close to dozen books, but the most famous still being spoken, which is related close to Bible, is this Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin was published on March 20th of 1851. Till now, till date, it is one of the most influential books ever published in America. In the first year after its publication on March 20, the first publication was done in the year 1851 on March 20th. The book sold around 305,000 copies in the United States, and another 2.5 million worldwide, which brings out the magnificent of this book. And this book does it did not remain just as a novel, but it was also translated to the stage by the name Tom Plays, which ran continuously for the next 90 years. Unlike the recent movies, if it touches around 100 days or 150 days, it seems to be a great phenomenal success. But in that time, this movie has been staged for around 90 years. So if this is there, what's so great in this book? Abraham Lincoln, the then president, looks into Harriet Beecher Stowe and tells, "So you are the little lady who wrote the book that started this great war." So, this book, as a writer, she did not stop with writing this book, but she also made efforts to go and meet the president at Washington. And Joan de Hedrick explains how she would have been. She's not so tall, but Abraham Lincoln is a very tall, lean Yankee person. And here in front of him stood this literature woman, fighting or bringing out the stories that was written in Uncle Tom's Cabin, making him understand the extremity of slavery, making him to understand the negativity of slavery, the cruelty or the brutality of slavery, how this is affecting how this is affecting each and every citizen there. So, after listening to all the stories elaborated by Harriet Beecher Stowe, I really wonder whether a president would have had so much of time to listen to a literature woman on her book. But she made him. She made him to understand the importance of her book, because they were all life stories which she saw in front of her eyes. The slaves who used to come to her grandfather and get treated for all the brutal wounds that they have suffered. Based on all that, she elaborates all the stories to him, and he says, "So you are the little lady who wrote the book that started this great war." This sentence really made me to understand, if a book has to be written, it should be written in such a way that it impacts millions and millions of people. And as literature students, we have a great role in shaping the society. So, this book started, she was forced to write, she made up her mind to write Uncle Tom's Cabin from Fugitive Slave Act. What is that Fugitive Slave Act? It says that even if a slave becomes escaped by his own means, if he is escaping and if he is going back to some place or the other, it should be the responsibility of that person to bring back this person as a slave once again. It means that a slave, once becomes a slave, has got no future at all to become freed or to become liberated. If the other person who finds that this person is a slave, and still if he protects him, that person will be in danger. That is Fugitive Slave Act. But from this Fugitive Slave Act, which is very ruthless, the road this book lays, it's to the Proclamation of Emancipation, which says, which is given by Abraham Lincoln himself, that a person, if he becomes slave, if he becomes free, a slave, if he becomes free by some means or the other, he is eligible to become free. That is the road which this book has laid. From the Fugitive Slave Act, it lays a road for Emancipation Proclamation, because the life of slaves was not so easy. Life of slaves was not so easy. So before going into the life of slaves, I would like to give a hint about Harriet Beecher Stowe's lifestyle. She was born in 1811 in Litchfield, Connecticut. So this, as I told you earlier, this Fugitive Slaves Act, which was established in the year 1850, influenced her to write tremendously. So in the year 1619, it was the first time that slaves were imported to Jamestown, Virginia, from Africa. Slaves, they were from Africa. If we would dig the roots of slaves, then that is another deep story. But officially in 1619 the first slaves were imported, and the slaves, they were useful in all types of works, no matter what. It might be irrigation, it might be agriculture, it might be satisfying a man's pleasure. Everywhere these slaves were used without any reasoning. They had no question why this is done. Nobody can question back. The future of slave is, or um the way the slaves are or mended is in such a way that they cannot ask questions back to anybody. Even if something harm is done to a person who has not done anything wrong, a person cannot raise question. He or she might be his own daughter or own son or own wife, or they cannot question, why are you doing this? No, their fate is that they have to keep their mouth shut. And the way they were imported, many pictures says, if a ship capacity is around 450, there would be around 650 to 700 slaves being imported in the same ship. When they travel from Africa to America, from Africa to any other part of the country has slaves, most of the slaves would die in the mid itself, because of diarrhea, or because of any other communicable diseases, or because of the clutches of the chains. The clutches of the chains was so bigger, because nobody was free even in the ship. Right from the moment they were stamped as slaves, they would be enslaved by chains or by any other means. So that made them to lose their lives, even without going and establishing themselves as chains in another as slaves in another country. And definitely, to explain the word slaves is really haunting. I really thank God once again for this, in this moment, that I am not slave. I am free now to talk. I'm able to express my thoughts. I'm able to express whatever I can feel, whatever I want to do, where I want to work, what I want to study, where I want to be, whom I have to marry, at what time I have to go, what time I have to come. And there is nothing called as slavery now. We are absolutely free. I'm free to think whatever I want. These people cannot think also in their own. So this book, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, takes the first step in the liberation of this slavery. In 17, how is the road laid? In 1787, the United States Constitution is adopted, and then 1793, we know that cotton was that in many during the Industrial Revolution and much before that, many other improvements are being made, and the United States Constitution bans the import of slaves, and Abraham Lincoln himself declares that this people who gets freed can definitely become free. They no need to be enslaved again. They no need to come back as slaves. They can choose their own freedom. So about this author called as Harriet Beecher Stowe, who had a very good education, who who had come from a very good background, where her father and mother both very well literates and working in the seminaries and working as teacher, marries to another person by name Stowe, who also encourages her to write, who did not stop her. And that freedom and many of the teachings that she has received, based on how people have to be treated freely and how slaves should not be there in the world, enabled her to write this book. And the biography written by Joan Hedrick has received the Pulitzer Prize in the year 1955. Much more to say on this topic, but now I stand wordless. Thank you for this opportunity given to me. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And our paper presenter section was finished. I think our chairman person uh, will have some discussion. Please, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe, first of all, presenters, thank you so much for, I think, 3 wonderful papers. So I wish we were there in person so that we could clap for you. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, taking the effort, and being here and sharing your work. Maybe we could, audience, if you have, those of you who were listening, if you have something to say or something to ask, I think you are welcome to maybe raise a hand and unmute and ask, or you could uh, put your questions or observations in the chat box if you have any. Please remember that there is no such thing as an irrelevant question, right? Anything that you may have to say or ask the researchers is most welcome. If you have any research related questions, please consider putting them in the chat box. I don't know how many of you are here because you are forced to be here. So maybe it is something that you haven't fully engaged with. But if you have engaged and if you feel that there is something you would like to say, you're most welcome to do so. So we will keep an eye on the chat box in case the audience has questions. Um, yeah, there's
Yes,
somebody else.
Srilata. Yes, Srilata here.
Yeah, hi.
I managed to come late today, so I missed a little bit of the first uh, paper, but of course that was a topic known. So, and an MA scholar was presenting about the ecological significance, I think, in Old Man and the Sea. And I'm happy to know that even Majumdar's paper, though brief about the Pulitzer, highlighted the ecological, the prizes given to ecological works, and how he pointed out that such prizes would help fight the ecological wars we are fighting. And also, I think even Beecher Stowe, though, the author has written on Jack London too. So there again, we have ecological significance, and the man being one of the God's creation also ought to live naturally. So, biography of Harriet Beecher Stowe also has relevance. I'm so happy that all the happy that all of you have chosen related ecological issue related works today, and I'm sure if we listen to the entire paper they would have, especially I would be interested to know more from Sayan Mazumder about the other works that he has perhaps worked on, or maybe knows about the why they were given the Pulitzer Prize. So thank you for that very inspired and emotional presentation, Harriet. Harriet Beecher Stowe is also one of my very favorite. I grew up reading it, so I think I grew up with the book. Thank you for that presentation. Yes. Mazumdar, if you have anything more to say about some of the, some more of the, prize winners, perhaps if you have worked on, if you can contribute a little more. I'm interested in the ecological issues, that's why, and people who are writing about them.
Yeah, my paper, like, because we started as it kind of an informal discussion, so I didn't go in all the details and all the names and uh, things that I took on the paper. And I have the presentation, and there are many other names and people. I think two things that I wanted to highlight was that uh, doing ecological work, it as the Pulitzer has so many categories, and in so many categories we see that ecological concerns are coming out. So in different categories we see the prize given to works on ecology, from history to literature to journalistic things, or to government policies on ecology. So this variety of um, prizes that are being given, what these prizes do is take this conversation into our discussion, our everyday discussion, that okay, this book has won the Pulitzer Prize, so what it is about, or this policy and the work on the Pulitzer winning journalists, like someone worked on the pipeline issues, so how, or the dams, that how dams are detrimental to the environment. And this is like, this prize can be taken as this center is also by themselves doing many projects and many other initiatives that is taking activism as one of the forefront activities within this sector. And so journalistically or academically, talking about the Pulitzer Prize, we can see this trend of focusing on ecological issues and highlighting them is something that should be more encouraged, and it can be traced as a trend that we see in many other sectors, like eco-critical works in literature like Amitabh Ghosh, or many other Anita Desai, and many other people who are working on this and writing now extensively on climate change and how climate change is a serious issue now. I think the prize is as a reflection, and the work of the center, if we follow it more closely, we can get more ideas that how the world view is shifting towards the climate change. And it is not just an issue that we read in books, but it is an issue that is here now, and we now have to take action against it. Thank you so much. I hope I have elaborated a little on
Yes,
your
you have,
question.
and I think you highlighted the fact that Pulitzer is mostly an investigative. I mean,
Yeah.
Pulitzer prizes go in not only for investigative journalism but also writing on such issues,
Yeah,
highlighting
it
such
has like
issues.
23
Yes.
different categories, and this prize and the names and the categories from different aspects, we are seeing that Pulitzer is given on works on ecological issues. So I think that is one of the significant things we can take from the Pulitzer Prize now.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Srilata ma'am, for the question, and Shayan for your response. Anything else that we have from the audience? We just have compliments on your papers, right? So, okay. Any other questions or clarifications, please feel free to post. I will maybe just in the meantime, if you have questions, you can type them or you can unmute and speak. My brief feedback points, not feedback exactly, just my responses. Again, I think I agree. Vinita says that there were three excellent papers. I couldn't agree more, Vinita. That was very enjoyable to listen to. So, if and all three, I think very as Shirata ma'am also pointed out, I think all three had that ecological connection. So that was good. I personally enjoyed it a lot because I also work in ecology. So for the first presentation, Snowlin, such a beautiful presentation. I mean, thank you so much for that. Just it was just so engaging to see something, that captures one's attention, right? So because academic papers, even with presentations, tend to be sometimes just a wall of text, so it's hard to engage. So but and you didn't just use pictures for the sake of using them, but you picked very relevant and appropriate images that actually enhanced what you were saying. So big appreciation for that.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
And so you're a first year MA student.
Yes.
Is this your first paper?
Yes, ma'am. Like presenting, this is my first
uh,
paper,
okay, so have you
but
worked
I've
on anything
submitted.
else?
In my BA, I worked on patriarchy and feminism.
Okay, okay. So, congrats on your presentation. And I would maybe recommend as you move forward, also think about building a stronger theoretical framework, because I think you engaged really well with the text, and also in a very meaningful way, right? You didn't just summarize, right? You picked specific instances from the text that were relevant to your the whole human nature, uh, what should I call it, binary, right? There's often this binary opposition between human beings and the natural world. I would also, in general, I think this is something which, because I work in gender studies, I'm very conscious of these things, that maybe don't use man as a synonym for human, right? So because when you say man and nature, I also get what you're saying, because our relationship with the natural world is very patriarchal, right? So we tend to construct the human sort of identity in very masculine and patriarchal terms, right? When we are looking at our engagement with nature, because we see the human species as dominant, and we even use gender terms like mother nature, in order to project and construct nature as something that is vulnerable. But at the same time, again, because man is a gendered word, I would always recommend, wherever possible, try to use gender neutral terms. Especially when you are using universal definitions.
Yes, ma'am. But in the novel, man was used as a generic term for mankind and human beings in
Yeah,
general.
but when was the novel written, and when are we reading it, right?
Yeah, thank you.
Uh, so there is this saying you might have heard of, right? We don't read things as they are, we read things as we are, right? And this is something that I actually wanted to tell all the three presenters today, that you've picked really, I think you've done a wonderful job of exploring the areas that you've picked. In research, I think something that, again, this is very subjective, it's not like feedback or anything, it's just an observation. That in research, I also feel very strongly about the fact that we need to contextualize our research in not just the areas that we are studying, but in the areas in which we are living our lives, right? So we are not reading, say, Harriet Beecher Stowe in that era, right? We are reading her today, and we still can relate so passionately with her, because something that she is saying is still of relevance to us in our context, is still a contemporary issue, right? We may not have slavery in that sense anymore, but we still have discrimination, we still have oppression, right? So maybe a little bit of bridging that gap between the theoretical aspect and the textual aspect of what we're talking about, and our own lived experiences, right? So again, when Hemingway uses a word a certain way, right, even the meanings of words are constructed within context, right? So I would also look at how language has evolved over the course of time, and just a disclaimer, right? Maybe when you are using such terms, that maybe put it in quotation marks to show that this is what the author does, right? Also, one more thing, in Hemingway's text itself was, you have this character called Santiago, right? Who is which is clearly a Hispanic name, and you have those very interesting cultural dynamics there of Hemingway, who is fairly privileged in terms of race and ethnicity, right? He's a white American, who is writing about this person named Santiago, right? So also in terms of representation, you might have come across this, there's this hashtag called own voices, right? When we talk about people from marginalized communities, when somebody from that community writes, it may be a very different perception, than when someone from outside. So you even mentioned in your paper about Spanish terms being used and all of that, right? And that was clearly not Hemingway's first language, right? It was English. So again, this is just, if it is of interest to you, that also might be worth exploring, right? How one particular racial identity is constructed in the novel by someone who does not belong to that identity. So just an observation in case you think it's helpful.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Um, do you have any, was there any particular challenge you faced? I think I can pose this question to all three of you, but to start with Snowlin, was there any particular challenge that you faced during the process of writing this paper? Any clarifications you may have about the research process, or something that you feel you need more clarity on in terms of how to go about it? If you have anything, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, you're talking about the theoretical framework.
Yes.
I'm not that familiar with theory, so.
Ah.
But the thing is, I only did it on the theme of man versus nature, and did not do any ecological criticism or whatever.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I get that. So in a sense, it was um let me it so if you keep to this approach, it's great for a book discussion, right? Because you're focusing on something thematic. But again, I don't know what you plan to do in the future. I'm assuming that a lot of people at the master's level are planning to be involved with the academic world somehow, right? So maybe eventually, if you're thinking of getting a PhD or whatever, you will also have to look for good publication opportunities, right? And it's never too early to start thinking about that, right? So if you're thinking of publishing your paper or writing your paper for publication, it's also a very good idea to keep up with contemporary research, right? So because ecology is huge right now, right? I mean, we are going through a huge environmental crisis which is global, right? And then it has things like the pandemic and all of that have added to the kind of stresses that all of us are facing right now, right? So there's a lot of research out there currently which is on ecological themes. So again, it's not always essential to engage with the text, but when you're doing, this is a research forum, right? So when you're thinking about um, how to approach a text, right, in from the scholarly perspective, I like to think of theory as, when you, let's say, you take a photo of yourself, you take a selfie, or you take a photo of somebody else, and you want to post it on your social media, right? You very often use filters, right? You may want to crop it, you may want to change the shading or the coloring or whatever, but you use filters of some sort, right? So I think that's a pretty good analogy for theory, right? Because theory allows us to look at texts from perspectives we wouldn't otherwise have come up with. So personally, I'm fairly excited about theory, right? So maybe at some point in time, you're most welcome to ask me later, contact me for recommendations for reading and stuff, because especially for ecology or gender. But theory is not something to be afraid of, right? Theory is something which can be very exciting, I think, when approached, with enthusiasm. So maybe think about that. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly move on. And Shayan, I really liked what you did with the presentation. Very, I think, very important take on. It was very action-driven kind of presentation, right? Where you looked at the importance of something like the Pulitzer and its impact, maybe, if that's the right word, on how we are perceiving the environmental crisis today, right? And when an organization as well known as the Pulitzer uh, draws attention to these issues, I think it's very, very important that you brought that out. And so glad to hear you're working on Eastern Kire. I have so many of her books right here on my desk, because one of my scholars is also working on Kire. So I really have, like, unless maybe if you have any clarifications or something that you would like to say about why you took this approach, I think I would like to hear that. Very unusual and very interesting approach that you took to the presentation. So, what made you approach it this way instead of doing what the other two panelists did, right? And who took works, specific works that won the Pulitzer. So, maybe if you'd like to elaborate a bit on that.
The first thing is that I had very short time for this presentation. Uh, so what I did was I saw the topic that the Pulitzer winning story, Pulitzer Prize. So I made the Pulitzer Prize a Pulitzer winning story,
Self here.
and that is how I think, because my research is also on ecology, so I took a part and I did my research on the Pulitzer Prize, that how did it impact, or how ecology impacted the prize. And from that context, I kind of separated a trend, what I found in the specific, like the specified time, that how I can explore that and maybe create, or maybe try to look into a direction that the Pulitzer Prize is going on. And it's not just the Pulitzer Prize, but because it's one of the topics here today, so I took it. But I kind of think it is a trend, a very necessary and important trend, that we should as we are involved in academics, we should look at it and work on it, and not just to look at it but put it in our daily life. And like the activism part, which journalism is so important, so in that context, I think environmental work needs activism. And that's why maybe I made my paper like this and discussed it like this. And thank you so much for your
Yeah.
feedback. It was very important. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to also maybe bring up in terms of any kind of challenge you have faced, any kind of issues that you think are there in maybe your own research work or research in general in our discipline?
Yeah, the first thing is, because I am from a background where literature is the department. I am in comparative literature. So from literature to ecology, people first think that how can you connect those things. Like ecology is a scientific thing, and being an art student, how can you work on it? What do you know about it? And I think that is the first thing that it becomes a challenge when you are interested in ecology, being a student from the arts. And but the more and more days are going, we are becoming less and less so rigid about it. And I think people, because literature is one of the more that reflects the society, I think it is also, it reflects the changes. And it's not just the scientists are doing their work, but to make it available to everyone through different mediums, through music or through literature. I think uh, we can do as people from the arts, that we can work on it more, and not keep science and arts as opposites, but two disciplines that come together, and we can do more interdisciplinary work in this area. So that is what I think the biggest challenge is, to not separate it but to work together. I think if that comes more easier, we
Yeah.
can do better work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, because I also work in ecological studies, and I sometimes have this imposter syndrome, right? Like, what am I? I'm a literature person. What am I doing working in ecology? And in fact, I asked this question to one of our keynote speakers that we did at a conference a couple of years ago, and it was entirely online at the time. So it was an international conference, and he's an ecologist who does a lot of activism, right? He works with indigenous communities in Alaska. And so I asked, and he said, yes, of course you can work on ecology, right? Because everyone has an ecology story. Maybe everyone has an ecology story they haven't told yet. That was the title of his keynote presentation that he did for us. So it was very encouraging to hear that, because I have actually heard people who look at ecology from the science perspective, right? Saying that it is a science, it is, it has no place in, or social scientists, or, people who look at issues like gender and intersectionality have no business being in the field of ecology, and, so, but yeah, we have as much right to share that space, right, of ecological discourses, I think, as any other discipline does. So, all the best with your research, and thank you so much. Um, and moving on to the last presentation, Harriet, ma'am, that was such a lovely story about you sharing a name with the author. I don't think I've ever come across anyone else who has said that before, right? That their research area was driven by the fact that they shared a name with the author. That's just absolutely amazing. And I'm so glad that you were so inspired by your father. I could relate, because I think I got my love of reading and books from my father. So uh, and I think others have also pointed out in the chat that just your passion came through so wonderfully, and I'm sure your students really, really enjoy your classes, and I'm so glad that there are educators like you out there who can actually communicate their passion, when they speak. I think that's so important, because our teaching and our learning, I think, happens not in these formal events where we do presentations, right? I think what's more important is the small everyday realities that we face, and how we engage with them, and how important it is to be empathetic and compassionate. And I think that came through so strongly. And I really also like the point that you made about it seems obvious, but when you said it, it just kind of reinforced that understanding for me, that when you said that literature has a role in shaping society, right? Like, again, I think this also ties into what Shayan was just saying, that sometimes we are told as students and scholars of English or cultural studies, that we are so far removed from reality, right? Our work is abstract, our work is theoretical, but I think you pointed out extremely well how, especially that her meeting with Abraham Lincoln, I think that was so important that you mentioned that, right? That because she's literally meeting the president of the country, right? And that the impact that the book had on the whole Civil War context and all of that, right? So I think it's very important to remind ourselves, that what we are doing, although people may tell us, even in my own university, I think people from other departments tend to think, what do English studies people do? They do grammar and they do creative writing, right? I've actually got that a lot, that's what we do in our disciplines. I think it's also very important for us to remind ourselves, and also showcase to others, right? That this is what we do, right? What we do has a direct impact on social reality. Literature can, I'm teaching this fantasy literatures course currently, and we talk about this so often in class, that literature, which has even fantasy and science fiction, right, helps us to reimagine the world in better ways, right? Helps us to see the world in ways that we can aspire to, right? So I think that was really important, and it was just an absolutely lovely presentation. I would have liked to hear a little more about, again, from the theoretical framework perspective, just in terms of life writing, right? Because you're looking at a biographer who has won the Pulitzer. So I have this unusual, I think, liking for biographies. I love reading biographies. So I remember this biography of Coleridge by Richard Holmes. It's in 2 volumes, and the second volume took ages to come out, and I was waiting for it as eagerly as others were waiting for the next Harry Potter book, right? So I'm really interested in biography, life writing, and the style of writing and all of that. So maybe if you would consider publishing, right? I think life writing is an area that doesn't receive as much attention as it should, right? So just the fact that you're narrativizing someone's life, right? And we are seeing this person, this iconic writer, through the eyes of a contemporary person. Just the fact that a biographer today would choose Jack London or Stowe to write a biography on, also says something about that their relevance, right? Their continuing relevance to our context. So yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. Ma'am, you're on mute. I still can't hear you.
The thing is, lovely to hear from you, ma'am. And as Sayan said, I also was left with very little time, but I wanted to make use of this opportunity, and definitely I'll work on things which you have said. Lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Yes, I think the time factor is something that all of us face. We we do things only because we have deadlines. Personally, because we have so much to do all the time that it happens. But I'm glad it happened, and I'm glad you didn't let the opportunity go. Yes, Shayan, please go ahead.
Can you share your email ID so I can, later contact?
Yes, I will
And
put it in the chat box.
okay, yeah, that would be fine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Also, your ma'am would have your HOD here would have my contact details if anyone needs it. Yeah, you're most even somebody from the audience. I'm always up for talking about research. So if anyone,
I'm glad, Meghna, I had a chance to listen to you today, and the way wonderful way in which you were, telling about the papers to the students, right? That way too, and I'm happier that you have an ecological. I started working from maybe the year 2000. Okay, on this, and I looked at Mahashweta Devi from an ecological standpoint. That's how I got into it, and I'm so happy that. Now, I was just wondering whether Peter Matheson won the Pulitzer, but he won some National Book Award only for his Snow Leopard and
Snow Leopard, of
yes,
course.
yes,
Yes.
yes. That was another lovely book. All these things I've worked on. So I'm so happy that I could meet you. You are still on,
Sorry, ma'am.
in Bangalore. You are which
Yes. I'm at Bangalore in Christ University. Yeah.
Oh, Christ University. Okay.
Yes.
So I'll get it from Maria Preeti, your number in case
Yeah, please. You're
should
most
do.
welcome. Yes.
Yes. Thank
Can I chip in a bit?
you.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sayan. And I've been our theme for this year is the prize-winning story, and it was so interesting that you looked at journalism because we that is unexplored as yet, and the idea of the story is something that's so engaging. Especially in advertisements, also you see this, you know, um, a story in every pizza. Uh, and that's coming into lot of into the advertising field. So it's all about discourse, and so stories probably not restricted to fiction, to uh, the genres that we have been working with. That's one thing, and um, Snowlin, that was a wonderful presentation. And Dr. Meghna, we have been trying to engage. I'll send you the concept note with which we started out. We've been trying to engage with what makes it a prize winning work. Okay, the geopolitics or whatever. And for instance, when we did the Nobel Prize, one of the presentations was a comparative study of the announcement by the Nobel Prize committee and the acceptance speech of the winner. So something drawing on those two to understand the why of the prize. So I think a small piece of advice to Snowlin, you can look at why the Old Man and the Sea got a Pulitzer.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, that was wonderful. And Harriet, we have spoken so much about this already. Um, that passionate presentation was wonderful, and to think that a biography got a Pulitzer. Somehow we all are conditioned to thinking that novels get prizes, but we and after we delved into this, we realized there's so many categories for which the Pulitzer is given, right? Even in our last meeting we engaged with the different categories for which the Pulitzer is awarded. That was such an enriching discussion, Dr. Meghna. I love the way you touched base with the students. You cut off all the frills of and pretensions of academic, strength and prowess. Thank you so much for reaching out to our students. I'm extremely grateful to you.
I think they're a little shy or maybe just tired at the end of the day. So maybe, if you would like to have for the students, if you would like to send emails or, just connect with us in whatever way, you're most welcome. And thanks to your college and your department for organizing this and for coming up with such an interesting topic which has so much potential, for various kinds of engagements and interpretations. So it doesn't get repetitive or monotonous because there are so many different entry points into this topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Sivapriya. If anyone else has to say something, I'll be. If I can take a moment to introduce people here, Dr. Meghna. That's Vinita Anil, my colleague, and Srilata Suganthan is the patron of our club. We have Dr. Rufus was with us. He's also the patron of our club. He was here.
Ma'am, I think you need to hold the mic closer.
Yes,
Yes.
Dr. Rufus and Dr. Srilata, the patrons of our club. And we have science professor, Dr. Debashri Tatare of Jadavpur University. She's on our board of editors. We are planning to start a journal. So these papers, the good ones, would make it to the journal hopefully. And we're also looking at whether we can have an international postgrad conference. Our focus is on postgrad students. So to bring scholars from across the globe and have maybe a webinar and where we work with the time zones and people across nations and countries can be present. Thank you so much.
All the best with that.
Yeah.
And I hope we can, it would be nice to collaborate on something. So glad to have met you all, and hopefully we can keep the collaboration going.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We had an interesting discussion. I thank the chairperson, Dr. Meghna Mudaliar, Associate Professor, Department of English and Cultural Studies, Research on Gender and Ecological Studies. Thank you for pleasing your mind, ma'am, with innumerable information and examples. I think we are really blessed to hear you, ma'am. Have you here, ma'am? And I wish to thank our paper presenters for their valuable contribution. My heartfelt thanks to our principal, Dr. Uma Maheshwari, ma'am, for encouraging us. And I thank Dr. Maria Priti Srinivasan, head of the department, for providing this learning platform and encouraging the research scholars. And special thanks to our patrons, Dr. Rufus and Dr. Srilata, ma'am, for their constant support. I thank the teachers, scholars for being here, the part of the learning platform. Thank you all. We will meet again after fortnight on 10th February 2023. And our next topic is symposium is the prize-winning story of Sahitya Academy Awards. Thank you all for being here and for your patience. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. In closing, I want to acknowledge the support given by Nancy, if you can see in tandem on the screen,